Okay, we are now live.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good
Thanks
afternoon.
for joining our November 7th Airport Commission meeting. We'll start off with roll call, and Brian, I'll let you run through that.
Yep, Chair Lorman,
Here.
Mr. Young,
Here.
Mr. Schwartz,
He's on mute. He's working on.
come
You're
back.
still on mute, Dave. There you go.
Yeah, I am here.
Okay, thank you. Miss Nye,
Here.
Mr. Hamilton,
Here.
Miss Randall is back
Oop.
on. There you go.
I'm
Excellent.
here.
Thank you.
Wow, that was good. Nice job. And it looks like Alder Jackson is not here. All right, well, we got a quorum. Fantastic. Brian, do we have the notification of meeting posted at the city?
Yep, the meeting notice was posted at the City Hall exterior windows and bulletin board on the city website and sent to the airport for posting at the airport.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Public comment. Is there anybody present who wishes to speak tonight? If so, identify yourself to Brian. I just see someone called guest. They're on mute, so they must just be listening in. And if Brian received any comments, email or written, he has those for submission. Okay, moving on. I've reviewed the minutes. I don't have any corrections or comments on them. Before moving on, do the commissioners have any corrections or comments to our minutes? All right. I'll accept the minutes as submitted, Brian. All right, getting to chair's report. First and foremost, and I know Rich has just been looking forward to this. I'd certainly like to acknowledge Rich's award, receiving the FAA Wright Brothers Award. And if you'll indulge, we'll just read through it briefly here. In your meeting packet is a copy of the certificate. And thank you very much, Rich. You can turn your volume off if you're tired of hearing it. But airport manager received the FAA Wright Brothers Award. Middleton Municipal Airport Manager Richard Morey was presented with the Distinguished Wright Brothers Master Pilot Award following a pilot safety seminar at the Middleton Municipal Airport on October 23rd. Presented by the FAA administration, this award recognizes U.S. citizens who have 50 or more years of civil military piloting experience or 50 or more years combined experience in both piloting and aircraft operations following their first solo flight. The award reads in recognition of your 50 years of exemplary aviation flight experience, distinguished professionalism, and steadfast commitment to aviation safety. Since the 1940s, the Morey family has trained hundreds of students at the Middleton Airport to follow in Orville and Wilbur Wright's footsteps. Noted was myself at the of the commission, and Rich deservedly recognized because his demonstrated safety and professionalism since he became a pilot half a century ago. The Wright brothers were two American aviators pioneering credits with inventing, building, and flying the world's first successful motor-operated airplane. The brothers made the first controlled sustained flight of a powered heavier-than-air aircraft with the Wright Flyer on December 17th, 1903 at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Rumor is that their first powered flight was no longer than the wingspan of a Boeing 707. So thank you very much, Rich. And if you have anything you'd like to add or educate us on, or tidbits of some history of your 50 years, please speak.
Well, thank you, David. Yeah, hopefully, this is maybe a bigger deal than I think it is. Certainly 50 years is a long time. It didn't seem to be all that long, came a lot quicker than anticipated. Figure I'm in my third quarter of life. I've got a lot of flying ahead of me. I'm looking forward to that. Next year will be, although we did start here in Middleton in 1942, my grandfather started operating in the Madison area at the Penco Field, as it was called, in 1925. So next year is our centennial of the family being in the air, although technically my grandfather soloed in 1923. So we've been up and around for over 100 years. Thank you. It was a great event, and we'll talk about it later in my report.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. And it's just remarkable. Okay. Oh, yes, please. Other commissioners, chime in for Rich. Comments?
Just chiming in. Congratulations.
Oh,
Thank you, Jack.
yeah.
I want to say congratulations
right.
too. And actually part of the reason why I'm here on the airport commission is when I was a little girl, my family just lives right down the street, and my father would take my sister and I up to the Moore Airport and for free to me as a kid. I don't know what he paid for it back then in the 70s, but I've just always had such a special place in my heart for this airport and in the city of Middleton, and really to return and get my pilot's license and have the experience of knowing Rich and the Moore Airplane Company and their staff has just been a joy, which is why I'm here to serve.
Congratulations, Rich.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I see Alder Jackson here is chiming in to me, and I'm just going to answer his question, and maybe he'll join our meeting. Okay. All right. Really, the only other things I have to mention in my report, because Rich will fill in the figurative and literal gaps regarding a runway crack ceiling. As you know, I keep an eye on the status of UL, just to, I think it's kind of, at our top of our list to watch. And again, California seems to be leading the way. The Reed Hillview Airport did, interestingly, work out a deal, and they now have UL 100 from GAMI on site, and they're just, I guess, selling it. And along with that, obviously, STCs. So it's interesting because, the airports that are trying to do this are all, I think, in the same boat, working with kind of they've always had two tanks of fuel, two primary tanks, but, figuring out a kind of a third tank working model. And that just seems to be what they were talking about in the details of that. And then, of course, Brian, Alder Jackson has joined us. Thank you. Fantastic. And then, of course, the Swift 100R is now at a flight school that almost looks like another kind of test drive of the whole product. That has a fleet of 172, probably, I think the newer SPs. They're working on have an STC for those models. So again, I'll continue to monitor it and see where it goes. But it looks like that deadline coming up for 2030 probably is maybe somewhat optimistically realistic. I see Rich smiling. Yeah, gesturing. Yeah, okay.
Let's
We'll do
hope.
our best. Yeah, that's all we can do. Thank and that is really about it for my section. So we'll move on to the airport manager's report. Quite a bit for Rich
Okay.
to.
Very good. Neighborhood relations from September 27 through October 29, 2024. 3 individuals made a total of 9 noise or low-flying aircraft reports. 1 individual made 7 of these reports. And all who wished a response, I did respond to. Again, in looking at this, no violations of FAA regulations were apparent in these reports. No aircraft accidents or incidents on the field. We were shut down for almost a week with the crack seal of the runway and taxiways, and that was completed. They actually were ahead of schedule slightly. Warranty inspection will be conducted in 11 months, but the inspection of the work that was accomplished was found to be acceptable by our state and by the consulting engineers. Other news: EA Chapter 93, the Visual Meteorological Conditions Club met at the Maury Conference Room on October 10th. That's a safety seminar as well. Garden Club continues to use our conference room at no cost. October 28th, flowers were arranged. They always leave us a nice bouquet for the front desk. It's very, very appreciated. FAA Safety Seminar was held, Maury Conference Room, October 23rd. Again, cross-country flight planning. Jörg Grossenbacher, the FAA Safety Team Lead Rep, presented, and then I was awarded that 50-year, the Wright brothers. Had very good attendance, more than I really anticipated. Well, I'm sure it was well over 80 people. And looking out at the audience, I'd flown with well over half of them. It was a nice evening for me. We do have another safety seminar scheduled, probably going to bump this back into December because November is getting awfully busy right at the moment. And it will be on winter flying considerations. And that's the extent of what we've got at the moment.
Great. Does anybody have any questions for Rich on his report? Okay. Well, thank you again, Rich. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll start off with discussion action item number 1. Review, consideration, and potential action on the request from Stark Fleet Academy, LLC, for approval of a specialized aviation operations service agreement to provide a small flight lesson operation. Mr. Russell Stark, IFR, CFI, CFII, ATP, owner of Stark Fleet Academy, LLC, has relocated his airplane from Dallas, Texas, and is requesting approval of a SASO agreement to provide a small independent flight lesson operation at the Middleton Airport. The initial plan is to utilize a Cessna 172 for the lessons, with 8 to 12 students by appointment only. Mr. Stark has previously provided flight instruction in Dallas, Texas, and the Madison area out of the Middleton Municipal Airport. A draft SASO and a copy of the required certificate of insurance are attached to this agenda packet for review and consideration. The Commission reviewed the request at the September 5th meeting and voted to continue review the request and additional information, including completion of a police department background check. The Middleton Police Department completed the request background check on Mr. Stark, and it came back with no items of concern, and also a copy of the approved 2019 minimum standards and requirements for aeronautical activities is included in tonight's agenda for review.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
can I provide a point of information for the commission?
Yep.
Prior to tonight's evening, the applicant indicated to me this afternoon that he is en route in transit and would not be available for tonight's meeting, and has asked to have his application continued to a future meeting. In addition, at your last meeting, you asked the city attorney to provide you with an opinion on the minimum standards and whether or not, based upon the information we have regarding Mr. Stark's application materials and business plan, if he would be able to qualify under the minimum standards. So that I guess the action I'd ask for from the commission tonight is, one, we'll have the city attorney provide his opinion, and then you can ask any questions. And then secondarily, would ask for a motion to continue the matter to a future meeting. That way, Mr. Stark can be present before any decision is made on his application.
Sure. So sounds fine. Let's go ahead and proceed with that. Matt Fleming.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I took a look at the minimum standards, and I think as the commission's well aware, for flight training, which I understand this to be the service being provided, that we have a requirement that there be not less than 6,000 square feet of ground area, on which there shall be a building to provide at least 3,000 square feet of floor space for aircraft storage and at least 500 square feet for office, classroom, briefing room, customer lounge, and restrooms that to be heated and lighted with parking. And I don't know how much ground space. Well, I mean, there's no ability to lease, I don't believe, that much ground space. But clearly we're coming nowhere near the indoor floor space and office space and classroom and so forth. So the application wouldn't meet these minimum standards. So without either a variance or waiver, the application could not be approved. So as to we do have a variance or exemption provision under section 2.4 of the minimum standards. Now, we don't really spell out in great detail in terms of what needs to be satisfied for a variance, but typically when you use, when you use the term variance, sorry, whenever I get a call, I get three things that ring. You're typically looking at situations where there is a particular hardship, where there's some difference in what the application is, what we require, that is not necessary to fulfill the purposes of the restriction that you have in place. That's kind of the way that zoning variances are looked at, and I think is an appropriate way to generally look at these as well. On top of it, the standards that we have set forth in section 4.2, I did a little background research, and they do appear to be designed in order to ensure that any flight training facilities, in this case, meet federal regulations. There are a variety of regulations under 14 CFR Part 141 that flight training schools need to comply with. Now our minimum standards in some respects are probably greater than maybe absolutely necessary to meet some of those standards. And so for instance, for some office space, at least based upon my initial review of the federal regulations, I think it's at least conceivable that some off-site office space could satisfy the federal requirements, even though they would not satisfy our requirements. But there is at least one standard that requires having a sheltered pilot briefing area on site. that would not be satisfied. And I'm not certain that the other things necessarily could be, but those were a little bit more detailed, and I didn't get really into the weeds about how far we could go under the federal regulations, but certainly there wasn't really an exception that I saw for the sheltered pilot briefing area. And of course, there are other reasons too why we have chosen these. So, I mean, I think to the extent that any variance or waiver would be considered, I would say you'd want to pretty carefully review these and make sure we understand all the reasons why we've chosen these particular standards. And of course, in addition, that our minimum standards aren't, we're not necessarily required to have our minimum standards only conform to the federal regulations. I only say that just because there do appear to be at least one aspect of the federal regulations that could not be met, which suggests to me that a great effort in determining whether a variance is appropriate may not make a lot of sense in this case, because at the end of the day, even if there were some relaxation here, there appears to be at least one standard that he clearly couldn't meet under the federal regulations. But if the commission thought that there was some other bases, or there was a way that he could meet that sheltered briefing requirement, maybe some further investigation might be warranted. But at this point, I don't see how it could be approved under the minimum standards, and I don't really see a variance as being at least as the application is proposed, as ultimately being a fruitful effort either. I should mention also that there is a waiver provision, which, as it's worded, it seems to, so the variance would always all have to be granted with respect, it would be a recommendation from the commission to the council to grant the variance. Strangely, the waiver provision gives the power to the airport commission, although that waiver would have to be consistent with Bureau of Aeronautics or FAA guidelines. I wasn't able to find what specific FAA or Bureau of Aeronautics guidelines might apply to a waiver. I would hope that whatever ones exist would be, pretty specific, not just in terms of other regulations that may apply, but, standards that would govern when a waiver to minimum standards would be appropriate, because otherwise, these minimum standards are effectively a council imposed regulation, and I would be concerned about an entirely discretionary basis to have the waiver go. But again, even for this standard, we get back to the fact that I'm pretty certain that a waiver in this circumstance where we've got a application that clearly does not meet at least one FAA requirement for flight standards, I just don't see that as an option for this either. So I think you still kind of end up getting to the same point when you look at the waiver provision. Although, like I said, I find that one a little bit more interesting and concerning. I myself would like to take some time to figure out exactly why that is worded as, an airport commission right to waive, and the variance the council has to approve. But again, I just don't see under these circumstances that this particular application calls for digging into those details before we can approve it. So that's a mouthful. So I hope hope everyone understands what I'm trying to say, and certainly happy to entertain any questions.
Commissioners, questions for Matt? Dave Schwartz got his hand up.
Yeah, Matt, what's your take on the interplay between the FAA regulations as opposed to the city wanting to do something different than that, as long as it's not in violation of any FAA requirements?
Right. Yeah. I mean, like I said, for instance, like the office requirements, it does seem to me, at least as I was reviewing at first blush, that we could have like a more relaxed requirement, like off-site office requirements possibly. I think there's some other stuff that goes along with it. So like I said, I definitely think that there's an ability, our minimum standards aren't, as far as I can see, minimum standards under the FAA. I mean, I think we have a higher standard than what is the minimum required by federal regulations. But like I said, here there is at least one, maybe more, but at least one standard that this application wouldn't even meet under the FAA rules, which is why, that looking to see whether some other ones might apply at the end of the day, I just don't see it approvable for that reason alone, which is why I didn't dig deeper into seeing how much leeway we had with some of the other components, because we just weren't going to get there.
And I understand all that. Does the city, whether it relates to this or generally dealing with waivers or exceptions to the requirements, does the city have a specific uh, procedure for following through on any such variance type requests?
Not really. I mean, there is some basic articulation of a standard, and it doesn't use the same exact language as for zoning cases. But, we are still we're still a governmental body, and some of the reasons for having those standards for zoning variances, I think, apply as well here. We don't want to be just making sort of ad hoc determinations. So that's why you have a fairly high standard when you're talking for zoning variances, because we've got other operators who have to meet these standards in the future. And if all of a sudden you just start giving waivers and variances away just to fit an applicant's circumstance, well, then you don't really have any standards anymore. So that's why I do think following sort of that zoning framework where, first of all, it's creating a true hardship. Second, it is, something that's not just created by the applicant themselves, but most importantly, that it's a restriction that is being applied, and there's just some unique circumstance where applying that restriction in this case doesn't meet the purpose of the ordinance. And that's why, even the more relaxed FAA rules aside, I think there still should be a great deal of reluctance to grant variances, except, only in the, most extreme cases where, here we really have just he's a few feet short of the 3,000 feet standard or things. And for some reason that just isn't available, so those types of situations where it really isn't, that person's fault, and the substance of the rule is essentially being complied with. Here, the application is basically asking us to throw the rule out entirely. And I just don't see that as being appropriate, because once we've done that, well, then we don't really have a rule any longer.
Well, and that's why, frankly, Matt, at the last meeting, that's why I asked that you look at it, because that was somewhat my take on it. So then I'll throw it back to you, David, in terms of procedure going forward. It would seem to me that it would be, again, I don't want to not give Mr. Stark appropriate time to plead his case, but at the same time, it's not a matter of pleading his case. It's a matter of his application not meeting the standards and requirements that are necessary for us to even consider it, frankly. And so I think my thought might be to let him know that he should go back and thoroughly read and review the city's minimum standards requirements and see if he wants to amend or resubmit his application. But his application just falls totally short at this point on its merits with the standards that we have to deal with.
Alder Jackson, your hand is up.
Yes, it is. I just want to say that I concur with my fellow commissioner David Schwartz. I think that this should be sent back to Mr. Stark and let him know that his application is not even meeting the requirements. So he needs to go back in and dig back in and investigate and see what he can do or what he can figure out, that he present an application to us that will meet the standards and everything that we're asking for.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or input to Matt? Okay. So Brian, that is, I didn't think about it from that perspective, and that's why we have a commission, and that's why we get legal counsel. So the motion would obviously be, Mr. Stark isn't here. He wanted to have an opportunity to address the commission. We've received some information here from, city attorney and input from commission, really asking questioning the I guess, the content of the application. So before the commission even gets to a point of saying yay or nay on something, do we go back to him and say, hey, there's standards and the application is falling short of those. Do you want to take a second pass at that and then come back to us?
Yes, I think based upon the commentary I've heard tonight, the motion would be in two parts. First part would be to continue the formal decision on the application to a future date. And the second part would be to provide commentary back to the applicant that at present, based upon the information that we have, the application does not meet the 2019 minimum standards, and to ask the applicant to provide additional information as to how they intend to meet those standards, or to otherwise, modify their application to meet those standards if they want to continue with their application. Something along
Sure. Sure, that sounds fair enough. So the first motion on to the commission is at this point to then we'll move ahead with continuing to review the application and not obviously make any decision on it tonight. And then the second motion would be to send the application back to Mr. Stark based on the input we have here, that it appears to not, be meeting minimum standards. So Brian, let's walk through this. Do you have drafted up the first motion?
Yeah, so it could be all one singular motion, but the motion would be
Okay.
continue the application for review to a future meeting, and to send notice back to the applicant that their application at present does not meet the 2019 minimum standards, and to request the applicant to either modify their application to either meet those standards or provide additional information to show how they meet set standards.
Okay. So commissioners, as Brian Gatto just stated, I'd like to make a motion. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. I'm looking at the digital hands here, seconded by David Schwartz. Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, thanks. To be continued.
I'm sorry, David, can I
Yep.
comment after the fact here? I agree
Yeah,
with,
of course.
Alder Jackson and what, Commissioner Schwartz had said. I'm not sure, I'm confused by, I guess, the two motions.
Oh, sure. Let's
yeah.
clarify. So-
we're saying we're deferring the conversation and then the first motion and then saying in the second one, it doesn't meet the requirements. And I don't know why we're not dismissing it now, unless I don't know what he could say to us that's going to change or alter the current application. He needs
Yeah,
to,
right.
there needs to be a separate application submitted, right?
I think it's to give the applicant an opportunity to respond to the questions. And because the applicant is not able to be here tonight to hear the decision in total, I think it gives the applicant an opportunity to respond to these questions that have been raised. And if they are not able to do so, then the commission, I think, has indicated where they stand, but at least gives them an opportunity to respond. That's the point of the motion being phrased the way it is.
Fair enough.
Yeah, all right. I think, it's a fair thing to do because no one's saying no right now. We're allowing it to stay in play. He's not here, and based on our city attorney input, we're actually providing him with some advice on how to address what are views as deficiencies. I mean, I would imagine, Brian, the city receives applications for all kinds of things all the time. And whoever's submitting an application for something, maybe the city looks at it and says, hey, you're missing something here. We're not saying no to you. We're just sending it back to you and giving you an opportunity to meet the conditions of the application.
Yeah, oftentimes we ask for additional information if things are unclear or if there are questions about, how a certain standard is met or not. So this happens.
Okay. Well, thank you. I mean, this is a first for the airport commission to have to deal with. And so there's no harm in taking time and asking as many questions as possible and moving on. Anything else before we go to our next agenda item? I don't want to cut anybody off. Okay.
Do you need me anymore then?
No, you're just welcome to stick around and enjoy.
I'm starting to smell dinner coming to waft down the stairs.
That's all right. You were in council last night till about 10:30. So thank you very much.
Yep, you bet. Have a good night.
Okay, item number 2. Review and consideration potential action items for a BOA petition request. And we've got quite a list of items here.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I can just provide a little bit of commentary for the group.
Yes.
So for those of you that were not on the commission in 2013, that was the last time that we had done a petition request to the Wisconsin Bureau of Aeronautics for funding to get in their queue for state and federal funding. We've talked over the last couple of months. There's a couple of different topics that have come up, equipment that's come up that wasn't in our previous petition request. And so in order to have those items be eligible for consideration for that state and federal funding, we have to go through a similar petition process. And that also ties into our bipartisan infrastructure law, the bill funding on the federal level as well. So Mr. Maury had a couple of ideas that he had brought forth to the chair and I. I've got a couple of things that I had written down from previous meetings that had come up in conversation. So this is just an initial list of things, and not to say it's the full end all be all, but this is stuff that is not presently covered by a petition request that we've done in the past. So a lot of the things that we talked about in terms of sustainability technology, that was not in our previous 2 most recent petitions. So that is something I've included in here. We've talked a lot about stormwater improvements. I think in conversations with our BOA representative, our listing of drainage improvements does probably cover a lot of that type of stormwater work. But I think just to be more clear, I think it's okay for us to add stormwater management in there, just so that there is no confusion. We've talked a lot about doing the swap over for LED lighting. That's one that I've added. We've all talked about the AWS system needing to be replaced. So that's one that was not in our most recent one. So that should be added. And then Rich had some items about some gate access that needs to be replaced and some tree trimming and removals of material along the creek corridor for obstruction, and then an articulating brush arm mower that we could attach to some existing equipment. I guess the only other one that I would maybe add, if Rich thinks is appropriate, we had talked about some snow removal equipment. We've got, I think, maybe two pieces of equipment, but one of them is getting a little bit older. So if we anticipate in the future a need to replace one of those snow removal pieces of equipment, we should add that to the list, and then we can incorporate that into the formal petition request. So, and then just to give a little context, so if the commission, for example, says that they're comfortable with this list and maybe has a couple of other things to add, then we'll start to put together the official paperwork that would go through the BOA process. There would be a formal public hearing that would actually get scheduled at our planning commission, and then hopefully we could get that done in December, and then have the Common Council adopt this list in early January to set us up for future conversations with our 23 and 24 BIL federal funding, so that all that then becomes an available funding source for those things.
And Brian, absolutely, the snow removal equipment should be part of the list. My understanding was we are eligible for a large influx of cash towards something like that, or the equipment, every 10 years. The Caterpillar tractor that we received, I believe, has only been 3 years out, but I might be wrong in the date on that. So I'm not sure when we're eligible. Also, my understanding with the bill, a lot of it, and maybe this is from an earlier program, but if it's considered, if you can use that money for general operations and simply changing out light bulbs on the lighting for the parking lot and the ramp can be, in my mind, considered general operation expense. But whatever the state says, updating this list and putting on the things that we might, our wish list here. Not all of them may be fundable, but I think getting it out there is very important.
So I guess in terms of process, if the commission members have anything else to add to this list other than the snow removal equipment that Rich just mentioned, I will run this list by our contacts at the BOA and just get an initial sense of, are there things on the list that they think are eligible for a petition process? If there's something that, for example, like the LED light swap out, if they think that is not eligible, we'll remove it from the list before we get things formalized for a public hearing. But happy to run that through our contacts and get their initial read on it, and then kind of go from there based on their guidance.
Sure. Okay. Well, then I don't need to read all the details of item number 2. I think Brian's covered that. I guess then, commissioners, from your perspective, it seems to me I want to make sure we always have adequate equipment to address, especially kind of the constant battle against brush and the growth into the waterways, and just kind of thinking ahead on that, and anything and everything we can do equipment wise to keep that under control, because it just keeps growing. Do you think the equipment at this time, Rich, is kind of adequate to do that?
Well, and I see Brian has his hand up. We don't have the equipment to maintain to do the brush cutting. We have leased that in the past. Of course, we need to have firm ground in order for that to occur. I'm looking at some very tall trees that are growing north of the runway right now that we don't have the manpower to get out there and take down with the people that we have. This would be, I think, some of it we can do. A lot of it probably needs to have a professional. Oops, excuse me. That's my light that goes off. Save electricity here. So looking at the trees that need to be trimmed, we're going to have to hire that out. If we can own that articulating arm brush mower and or again lease it for, I think it's about $6,000 for a week, then we can get back in and do this. The waterways were never designed to be maintained. They're just rough. They're difficult to get down into. Either have to go with that arm, or you can have to have people go down there and do the cutting with chainsaws and haul that stuff out essentially by hand, which is what was accomplished a couple years ago. So, yeah, we don't have the equipment we need. We don't have the manpower we need for that. We do have the equipment and manpower to move the snow and to mow the grass.
Uh-huh. And obviously our grant funding from the BOA and Fed covers equipment, just not labor. And that's obviously on the airport enterprise fund. So
And that funding also does cover planning. So when we talk about drainage and stormwater, so it's likely that to get a long-term solution, or at least semi-long-term solution to that drainage issue, we'll need to do some sort of study that is eligible for BOA and BIL funding, because we had that listed in a previous petition request. So that's something that likely with the bill funding from 2022 and 2023, we would likely be able to fund part, if not most, of a drainage study to get a sense of what's the long-term solution look like for that.
And just keep me on track here, Brian. I don't want to take the discussion too far out of the boundaries, but is stormwater utility involved in any of this? Because I remember previous commission meetings, some of the stuff was brought to them where it was sort of, okay, some of this is within their purview. Yes, it's airport property, but at the end of the day, it's all city property. And I suppose just like stormwater utility buys equipment to do certain things and carry out certain tasks, I would imagine there's some kind of sharing there. So
Yeah,
we buy
let me,
equipment and they assist.
I don't want to speak out of turn, so let me take some time to research that a little bit more and get a better sense of how the utility may or may not be involved here. I mean, the airport is a payer into the utility, as are other properties in the community. So let me spend some time looking into that, and we'll have further conversation about that.
Yeah, ever since I've been involved at this level in terms of the airport operational side of it, it is the never-ending battle of this brush growth and the waterways, because it's nature. I mean, right? I mean, it's just the way it is. Things grow and we have to manage them. So yeah, I mean, anything we can do to just always stay on top of it, equipment wise, yeah, and planning. If there's maybe something that can be done there, where I could see that where we do some funding, we do some study work, and maybe that is usable for stormwater utility to assist in ongoing management. Yeah. Commissioners, any other observations and thoughts in terms of things we're missing on this list that you have up in front of you, in addition to what Rich has already recommended? Brian's hand has been up.
Yeah, I don't know if this is in the current petition or not. I was just thinking about different things that maintenance, et cetera. So this is probably a question for Rich, and it's in regards to like the fuel tanks, the fuel. I mean, what's kind of like the life on those? I'm just trying to think ahead. Is this something that, hey, in 3 or 4 years, maybe we need to get a new, a tank replaced? So I'm just kind of throwing that out.
Brian, good question. I'll be looking into that. Our insurance really, I think, would be the limiting factor. These are double-walled tanks in a containment. Now that's belt and suspenders. We don't have, you can have a double wall tank freestanding with no containment. We have a containment as well, which, really makes the insurability on this for any spills be much, it's less of a risk, obviously. We just invested a fair bit of money having them cleaned and painted. I anticipate them, they're in good shape. They've been maintained well. I don't anticipate any issue with them having to be swapped out anytime soon. That said, I know an awful lot, and these are owned by Maury Airplane Company. If we were to replace one, it would, of course, be owned by the city, and there's nothing wrong with that concept. I'm just not seeing that as a possibility. If we want to put in that option as a placeholder, as an awful lot of airports do, just in case something like this happens, I don't think BOA has a problem with it. It was in place a couple years ago, and then they just removed it after pretty much looking over our tanks and deciding we didn't necessarily need it. But it doesn't hurt to have it on the list for potential. Nothing, all it means is that it is potentially fundable, and having it there and having it listed as such saves a couple months if we ever decide we really need to have this happen.
Okay.
Commissioner Randall.
I get to unmute. Yeah, I'm back on the waterways for Brian. I think that's great about seeing if there's a study that could be possible that would support with BOA for looking at longer term maintenance. Because when I was fortunate enough to be involved when we did the clearing 3 years ago, and the waterways are really unique here. They change in topography, they change, and the equipment that Rich is talking about is exceedingly effective in many of the areas. And then there is obviously manual labor. And then what we also employed were some lady goats for the more precarious. It was a larger study larger with the goats then, but it's also a possibility for some of the tricky areas. But the part that we didn't move forward with was the revegetation with the kinds of plantings that support erosion or prevention of erosion for root structure, but not getting the roots into the waterway or growing up tall. And I imagine you've had to deal with that in the city with repairing Pheasant Branch Creek, actually, frankly, right behind our house. So if some of that could be included, that'd be wonderful to have that comprehensive, and is a step-by-step process, as plants take a while to grow, in that aspect. But anyway, I really support looking into that and see if all of that, like a 3-pronged approach, can be used.
Oh, thank you. That's excellent. So, I don't know, Brian, I guess these are questions you'd have to pose to the BOA. I mean, how would they approach us, looking for these management and mitigation systems like goats? I mean, I suppose we could have a goat farm on prem and, in a little corral out there year round. And then Rich would have to go out there and feed them in the winter and clean up after them. But, it's a real fair thing because, they're doing the same work as the equipment and machinery.
Can I add something on that, David?
Yeah.
I just want to be really clear, that, well, the whole point is that they don't need to be fed because that's their job.
That's right. They leave them outside.
Right. They're getting rid of everything they'll eat everything. So then you have the opportunity to replant.
Oh, you don't even have to clean up after them then. Okay.
No, you don't have to clean up because it fertilizes as they go. It's the best deal in town.
You might have to milk them though.
No, they hate water, so you don't have to worry about any of that getting in the water. So they go right up to the edge on the steep surfaces. So I'm a big fan of that, obviously, and It's just a unique area, and I really do like pulling in a variety of things for maintaining it. Obviously, with our weather patterns, we can't say that we're not going to have a flood like that again. And the more that we have an established, root system, which I could go on and on about that, but that's the waterways do help drain from the airport. And
Yeah,
anyway.
Brian can make note on that, because this is one of those things that definitely can get a referral to another committee, and other city staff for some guidance and input.
Yeah,
Because it's
and I
first
did
time
want
I've
to
ever,
say
yeah,
too that like Chicago O'Hare uses goats all the time. It's a real effective way that they use it, and Chicago Water, Sewer, and Utility uses it on a lot of their plants, and so it's a viable option.
yeah, and these are the kinds of things that I think the city is generally quite in support of. So we just have to be reminded of it. There's if we don't write it down and keep it up front as a discussion, then we forget about it. So, well, thank you. Commissioner Schwartz, your hand is up.
Yeah, just real quick, when we present or create this list, how do we prioritize it, or does the BOA prioritize it, or how does that work in terms of what gets considered and what doesn't get considered?
Yeah, the list itself is not prioritized, so we send them a list, and that's what gets approved by the BOA. But then in terms of when the funding comes around, then we have to decide which of those projects on the list we're going to use the BOA funding on. So at that point, in a later date, then we'll decide, of the 6 things that are on there. Like, for example, we've already decided through the capital budget process that the taxiway design is an item that we'll use BOA and BIL funding for the design of that. So that we've already established. That was on a previous BOA petition process. And so when that money comes up for authorization and whatever the fancy word the BOA uses for that, we'll make those decisions at that time. At this point, for the BOA petition, it's just getting the list of eligible projects approved by the BOA, so that when the funding is available, then we can tie the funding to those projects. So you don't have to rank the list today, is what I'm saying.
So ultimately, we get they approve an amount of money, and then we can prioritize it within the list. Yeah. Okay, great.
Do the LED, for example, like the LED lighting, Brian, the city already kind of has a project in play for that. Would the airport even be considered part of that? Or is this specific to street lights?
It's specific to streetlights, but we'd have to see if the type of lights that are out at the airport are similar to those that we're swapping out for the streets. So that's something we can take a look at.
Mhm. And go ahead, Commissioner Randall.
Mine was actually on the LEDs, is out of my element. Rich may be able to answer that. I was just thinking about the airport beacon itself. Is that, I don't believe it's LED. I don't know if that could be shifted, but that's on.
A
Obviously all the
rotating
time at
beacon?
night. Yeah, the rotating beacon. I just was wondering about that.
The one I can never see when I'm out flying.
Right. I wasn't going to say that. I'm always struggling, at night trying to see that. So.
Anybody ever see it when they're flying at night? Oh, Rich. Yeah, I know, Rich.
Yeah, well, Rich has laser vision.
Yeah. Okay. A pilot who hasn't been flying for 50 years. Anybody? I just look for the car dealership.
Right. Well, anyway, Rich, I don't know. What is that?
I'd have to check. I don't believe the beacon was swapped out with the LED upgrade that has everything else on the runway, and lighting and taxiways are all LEDs at this point. I'd have to double check with the state under Mead and Hunt, or with Greg. They'd know the bulbs. There may very well be an LED option available. I'd be surprised if there isn't. And again, it didn't get swapped out Well, I don't know that it did or didn't. I'll have to look to see if that was part of the project.
Oh, that's, hey, if it can be brighter.
Exactly. Thanks.
Jack, do you see that beacon when you're coming in?
It shows up on my GPS really clearly. Yes.
No, that does not count. No, this has to be eyes out the window. Okay. I consider that a big win and ask if we find something. Any other input on the list from the commission?
The only motion I would need from the commission at this moment is to direct staff to continue to work with the BOA on the petition authorization process.
Okay. Okay, commissioners. So the motion is for us to direct staff to continue to work on this list for the BOA. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Seconded by Brian Hamilton. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Brian, please take us away on review of our finances.
Yes, give me 1 second here.
And I'll add some comments to it. I don't know if you want me to start out with my comments or you want to review. You go first, Brian.
Just nothing out of the ordinary for October, just normal payments coming in and payments going out, revenues coming in, so nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay. I was just going to add, I don't remember if I've brought the commission up to speed on this. This is all already addressed by the city in our budget hearings. That in the budget, the city has moved ahead and is going to assess a 2% of fee on the airport enterprise fund to cover city staff time for their work that they do on behalf of committees and this commission. The city's also assessed a similar type of fee, for example, at the golf course on their enterprise fund. And I think even this has happened in the past and been removed and then now added back in. So be it. I supported it. Generally, I vote. Anything that comes up in front of the Common Council regarding the airport, and the Common Council's voting to spend our money, I'm pretty much up there saying no. But this was one I didn't fight. Sometimes, you just go that direction. The other thing is, and this is also that the Common Council directed that the cost of the easement for the RPZ would be split between the Airport Enterprise Fund, which is 75%, and 25% from the tax finance district number 3. Basically, it's going to boil down to is $192,300 that we are paying to use the RPZ in its current place. And we're paying from May 2023 up through basically December of this year. And this is not a discussion item. This is just facts that we obviously have sitting with the FAA, the ALP, with our requested modifications to move the RPZ off the private property. And the goal is obviously to get that done as soon as possible, so we don't have to take the RPZ payment into next year. which would then, be starting out with, say, a whole year's worth, could be another $144,231. Again, coming out of the Airport Enterprise Fund, basically, and split with the $48,000 coming from the TIF district. So obviously, we're motivated to get that taken care of because it's a financial impact on the airport. Rich, you have your hand up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just clarification. When you say 2% of fee to the city, is that the fees that come from the land lease and the flowage fees, or is that considering everything the airport gets, including the federal and state fundings and entitlements?
Good question.
It's just the internal, it's not inclusive of federal grants. I
Okay.
don't have the number in front of me, but I think it's like $2,000 is what the
Okay.
check was.
Very good. That's what, all right, there we go. That's what I wanted to know for clarification. Yeah, I certainly hope we can figure out something to do with that easement. Considering what the lot was, they had it up for sale. Yeah, too bad we can't lease to own. It's my, but anyway.
Yeah. So, and last night during the Common Council, there was a comprehensive budget review. This was presented to the Common Council. Originally, the city staff recommended a 50-50 split between Airport Enterprise Fund and the TIF district, which I supported. And so when it came up for a vote, the Common Council revised it to a 75-25 split, which I, of course, didn't vote in favor of. So it was a 7-1 vote, and that's where it stood. So that really is all I had for my comments regarding the finance portion. Brian, any other gaps to fill?
Nope.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions for Brian regarding finances? Okay. Any future agenda items?
So I'll keep the commission apprised on the schedule going forward. There's a couple of outstanding items on the committee ordinance language, so that'll come back at some point once Matt and I have something that's ready for your review. Typically, it's my understanding that the body does not meet in January because our first meeting would fall, I think, the 2nd of January. So presumably, unless there's some need to meet, we would likely not meet the 2nd of January. We may meet in December if there's, items that are ready for review, so that the next meeting would be tentatively, it would be the 5th of January. So I'll keep the body apprised of how the schedule might look for that.
Sure. Commissioner Randall, hand is up.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Brian, 'cause obviously I'm newer to the commission, wasn't here with a lot of the discussions about the RPZ. Was it determined that a lease to own was not possible for that land?
It was not offered as an option for us to consider.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, if anything really came up urgently, in a positive move where we had to, city would be asking us to make decisions regarding any development for the RPZ, then we could always just hold a special meeting, and Brian would keep us up to speed on anything like that as we move towards December, January timeframe. All right, well, with that, if there's nothing else, going once, going twice, I will say we do stand adjourned.